Welcome to the Procurement Software Podcast, where we aim to educate and inspire you about how technology is changing and shaping our profession. The truth is, there's never been a more exciting time to be in procurement, but only if you're one of those organizations that's embracing the change and driving new developments. And this podcast is all about giving you the tools to help you get there. So buckle up and let's get right into this week's show. Yes, hello, and a very warm welcome to another episode of the Procurement Software Podcast. Last month, I had Dave on the show from Valdera, and he was talking all about chemicals and raw material sourcing and why horizontal platforms aren't really fit for very specialist categories. And we've got another one of those case studies today. So my guest today is Eshan Jayamanne, and he is founder and CEO of Krane AI. They are a native procurement and material management platform for the construction industry. And their platform covers everything that construction professionals would need, from general contractors, owners, and subcontractors. Sits across $17 billion of active projects, catching supply chain risks before they reach the construction schedule. Eshan, hi, very warm welcome to the show.
James, nice to be here. Now we're at 21 billion, so we're scaling pretty fast.
Oh, wow, you've scaled pretty quickly since Claude did his research for me. So Eshan, you come from 3 generations of construction. You're a licensed professional engineer with over a decade on projects ranging both from small builds to billion-dollar programs. You didn't come from software or consulting, and you're not a sales and marketing bro. You actually came from the industry itself. So I think a good place to set the scene would be, when did you first realize that the procurement problem within construction was big enough to build a company around? And what was it that specifically pushed you from thinking, this is broken, to I'm going to fix it?
Thanks, James. I mean, look, I was probably one of those guys who hated software and said no software on my jobs because it was sort of taking more time than like helping our teams. And or to be honest, like that was, but I also knew that with the complexity of the work, with the amount of data that's in each of these construction projects, you needed better software to help our team. So I would say that was a starting point for me where I, consistently thought about what could be better with the current tech stack that exists for construction. But, to be honest, where everything started for me was in the field, right? Like I come from construction. I spent most of my time, being on construction sites, looking at production, looking how things are getting built. The number one thing that I saw was, material getting in the way. When I mean material getting in the way, it means either certain teams are just sort of waiting for material and they don't have anything to do, or they just have too much of one type of material that it's sort of inhibiting them to actually produce fast, right? So that sort of was like a bottleneck in every single project that I went to. And I sort of then went backwards. Okay, how are we ordering the material? Why are we ordering this much? Like, why do we not know when things are going to show up? How do we not know what lead times look like? So I went into the rabbit hole of like looking at what the root causes were. And we realized we can't solve this complexity through a bunch of spreadsheets, and hence Krane was born.
So when you said, when you were describing all of those problems there, was that because historically it was all managed on spreadsheets and email, or did you already have oftentimes some software in situ, but it just wasn't fit for function?
No, I mean, I think when we go to our customers, even today, 95% of our customers are still on spreadsheets and email, right? Coordinating millions or sometimes billions of dollars worth of equipment and material through a bunch of spreadsheets and trying to sort of stay coordinated across different procurement teams to not only purchase at a single project, but sometimes they're buying it at an enterprise or a portfolio level. I mean, a great example is like data center projects where owners are like now trying to buy as many equipment as possible so that they can sort of, position them into various data center projects. And I'm like mind blown to see that all of them are like the coordination, the communication, the due diligence, all of that happens either on an email where they sort of get the information and then jump back into a spreadsheet though, so that they can evaluate.
Wow, that surprises me even today in 2026 that you've still got that as the most common sort of customer current situation that you're finding. Walk me through then, what's the DNA of your typical customer that you're describing there? Are they quite small businesses or are these like big corporations?
I mean, that's a very interesting question because I think in the past, you could only build for one of them. You could either build for like these enterprise big players and sort of not focus on SMBs and mid-market, or like vice versa. But like what we're seeing today is like everyone's challenged by procurement and supply chain. So we're sort of getting exposed to both types of customers. The way we see it is we have two types of personas. One's a direct procurement customer who's directly purchasing material from suppliers or distributors or sometimes even manufacturers. So you can think of them as trade partners, EPC contractors, or even data center owners that's procuring large equipment. Then there's the indirect, procurement groups, which are mainly general contractors that are buying scopes of work through trade partners. So we were able to sort of support both of them because we see this entire workflow as one process, and it's been brilliant. Yeah.
So in the latter case, then that would be general corporations that are perhaps not construction companies, but are running some large civil engineering projects, and they need a fit for function piece of software to be able to manage those big spends.
Yeah, think about. Take any general contractor here in the US who sort of is managing projects and they have to manage both the schedule and the budget, but then they're buying out different scopes of work through subcontractors. But they still have to, pay attention to all of like the submittals, all of the procurement packages that are being bought out through trade partners, but then there's inherent risk in them. And sort of like what Krane does is we sort of help them transparently manage that risk across these different players and help them deliver on time and on budget.
To have everything under one umbrella, right?
Correct.
So delays on these projects, I guess, don't come from one big failure. They all mount up from hundreds of small gaps across submittals, procurement, deliveries, inventory. Walk me through what that actually looks like for a project engineer on the front line who's running perhaps like a healthcare build or a new data center. Where does that typically start to fall apart?
Look, I mean, I think you answered the question. It's multiple different places, right? Like I think as a project engineer, I think we're at a place where we have so much work and so less like capacity is like a constraint right now. So your typical project engineer or sometimes your project manager is sort of firefighting daily, trying to like troubleshoot a problem with a trade partner or someone on the field. So then what we end up seeing is there's like, gaps in like information that sort of like is not recognized and the risk is not assessed, and then sort of they, lose control or they don't solve that. I'll give an example, right? Like the main reason why teams manage a procurement log is to identify critical supply chain, critical materials that might impact the schedule. Now, if like your project engineer or your project manager is not keeping an eye on that Excel spreadsheet and keep updating that and asking trade partners, hey, like has the lead time changed? Has like my switch gear or my chiller lead time switched or changed? If they're not identifying those changes and then reflecting that into a schedule so that they can say, hey, like, by the way, my lead time shifted by 2 weeks and here's the risk onto my schedule and onto my milestones. Now you're sort of like completely, you're not completely taking that risk into the schedule. So you're losing that visibility, real-time visibility. And the way that I see that is like twofold, right? Like we exist, number one, to put all the data together to make sense of the data and highlight the risk. And I don't expect the project engineers and our project managers to sort of go and do that heavy grunt work on spreadsheets to figure it out. What we expect them to do is to take action on that data and figure out, hey, like, is there an alternative vendor? Or is there a way to sort of sort of load the schedule? Is there a way, if my chiller is now delayed by a couple of weeks, could we sort of resequence the work? This is the type of action-oriented outcomes that we expect from the project teams. And we're here to like sort of make sure that data is surfaced.
Yeah, and I like that because number one, spreadsheets are very much exposed to human error. But number two, as you sort of correctly, sort of indirectly alluded to in your answer, these engineers are not paid to do admin in Excel or in Google Sheets all day, are they? I mean, if they're highly skilled professionals that should have their time freed up to do other things. So if they note a delay on the phone or on an email from a supplier, but then they forget to enter it into Excel, it can all come crashing down. So yeah, I do get that. The obvious question then from that point onwards would be, there are ERP systems that are quite common in the construction industry. Oracle and Viewpoint have been around for like 30 plus years. And okay, it's old technology, but it's in situ oftentimes. And then on top of that, you've got industry-specific software. Procore is probably the biggest example of a well-established enterprise project management suite that's very dominant, very prevalent within the construction industry. What is it then that those collectively didn't solve that Krane AI stepped in to be able to do?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, we work really closely with the Procores, Autodesks, and the Trimble's of the world. These are the two key platforms that help architects and general contractors coordinate and communicate, drawings and specifications. For us, that's the foundation that sets the project. But what like those systems don't do is sort of learn from data and make it very action-oriented for the teams. Like if we look at procurement, for an example, our workflow starts by identifying that really closely understanding like drawings and specs that exist on a Procore and Autodesk, and then sort of doing the work that's very admin heavy for the project team. What I mean by that is understanding critical material, understanding how that impacts submittals, understanding lead time impacts of that material, and then figuring out when deliveries are going to show up. So that's sort of the difference between the two systems. One, we're like helping the construction teams operate and like manage like the supply chain workflow that they're currently doing through a bunch of spreadsheets. But at the same time, we're integrating upstream with these legacy players so that we have most and up-to-date like foundation pieces of data like drawings and specifications. So that's how we're sort of working well together. And procurement is like, look, 50%, 40 to 60% of construction budgets are materials.
Yeah.
And I'm, again, like mind blown to see that there's no one system that sort of brings all of that like data together so that project teams can learn from them. Procore and Autodesk and Trimble, they've focused a lot more on design, a lot more on how do architects and contractors coordinate to sort of solve some of the upstream issues. We're really focused on downstream issues. You also talked a little bit about, James, okay, like what about your general ERPs or like, and do they not solve like procurement issues for construction? And unfortunately not. Just like your previous partner who came to like the show, I have to give you the same answer because there's so much nuance and specificity to like the scope of work for construction. And it's not as repeatable as like your general like procurement that's been managed through those systems. Like I'll give you an example. We're like really closely working with one of our customers who's almost like a design partner for us. And we're going through with them to sort of understand when a bid from a supplier comes into their court, how do we assess a bid? How do you assess the technical compliance factors versus like the business factors, right? So when you're like going through the technical compliance evaluation, how does that equipment sort of fit to the specifications required for that project? Now you're going into detail a level of detail that you don't see in some of these general procurement softwares. So that's how there's like a little bit of a nuance between some of those other industries versus construction.
Yeah, and I completely get that. I mean, I really, for the purpose of the audience, I was asking, because I know personally that ERPs, I mean, I come from industry, not from construction, but the similar kind of thing. It's fine for managing raw materials, but it wasn't really much use for managing much else beyond that. So let's dig in then to the nitty gritty of how this actually works then, because we touched on a bit how Krane AI differentiates itself from ERPs and sort of project management software that's more specific to the construction industry. Let's go under the hood and examine how it actually works. So you've got several AI agents. You're an AI native platform that are able to do different tasks. You've got Milo that reads the specs and drawings and generates procurement log in minutes. In practice, walk me through how accurate that is, and what does the human have to do as like the human in the loop before you actually then give the agent instructions to carry on doing what they're doing?
Yeah, just to go one step back, I think we view like our workflow as, pre-selection of vendors and trade partners and post-selection.
Yeah.
The pre-selection is mostly about understanding like your drawings and specifications and building a foundational understanding of, okay, what's needed from a procurement standpoint for this project. And then how do we help the contractor put together RFP packages? How do we then evaluate those bids as they come in and help them sort of identify and compare and contrast apples to apples, the different bids from both, suppliers and trade partners. So in that workflow, you talked a little bit about some of our agents. We personified our agents so that it's easy for our team members to understand what they do as well. In that workflow, the human is tightly in the loop, right? Like, and like we will never make a selection of a vendor or a trade partner. And that's what's not automated. What's automated is fetching the data, and sort of comparing and contrasting them, apples to apples, giving them an easy database so that they can make the decisions. Understanding what's excluded in that particular bid. Understanding the differences between prices and lead times. Understanding if that specific bid is for the specific RFP that we've sort of helped the customer draft. So as you can see, like we're doing sort of the heavy grunt work in this workflow and surfacing data so that the procurement teams can make quick decisions and informed decisions on the set of stakeholders. So that's what we call the pre-selection of like the pre-selection phase. Now, when we go to post-selection, when your trade partners and your suppliers have been identified, you have issued their contracts, now we go into tracking. What that looks like is, again, a bunch of grunt work, right? Like think about sending a bunch of emails and sort of checking, hey, like, what's the status of this material? Has it gone through fabrication to kitting?
Yeah.
Is it on a truck? Where is the truck, right? Like, I do not think project engineers or like project managers who have like sophisticated degrees from great schools should be sort of coordinating through email about this. They should be making decisions. So that's what we do, right? We sort of leverage our agents to sort of say, hey, like, there is a delay of this material. Oh, we don't have a response from the vendor. We're sort of highlighting risk here. Or here's how this impacted the schedule. Or this is how the schedule is impacting the supply chain. So our goal in the post-selection process is like really closely tracking this life cycle in like this material process all the way to delivery and installation and supporting our team's surface risk.
And I love that your agent that does the follow-up is called Chase. That's probably the most appropriately named agent you could possibly have.
Right. And we joke about that, but that little agent is saving so much time.
Oh yeah, I can well believe it. Yeah.
It's crazy, yeah.
And you hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, someone with a construction engineering degree shouldn't be spending half of their day doing admin, just like a procurement manager in a large corporation shouldn't be chasing PO approvals.
I mean, James, like I know for a fact I got into construction because not to sort of like send emails. I got into construction because I love like solving engineering problems that are challenging and then going into the field and see it getting built and maybe like help solve some critical problems there, not do like the admin work.
So what does a typical procurement manager or project manager's week look like now that was fundamentally different to pre them using Krane? Just give me a couple of the major differences. I mean, we've covered off one, right? That there's drastically less admin, but walk me through a couple of others.
Number one, when they log in, let's just break that down again. Like on the pre-selection workflow, rather than trying to put a spreadsheet together with all the bids that they've received and trying to sort of digest that and then find emails through all these different vendors and like put that to an email spreadsheet and then sort of spend time massaging the spreadsheet and then trying to like evaluate what is the best option for that specification. Now they are logging into, Krane on a Monday or a Tuesday morning and they have a bunch of like options to select from. And what they're doing there is like then going into the technical details of like that bid versus the specification. That's where we want them to spend more time. Is this the right, bid or the quote for the specification? And like, how has Krane, evaluated this vendor versus the other? So now they're into like engineering, technical decision making rather than sort of like the Excel spreadsheet mastermind work that they do. So that's number one. On the post-selection side, this is like something that I really love. Normally, you have like coordination meetings between general contractors and trade partners on the project side. It used to be 2-3 hours heavy, going through a bunch of spreadsheet items and asking them questions. Hey, did you update this? Did you update this? Is this different? Is the lead times changing? Now they go into the meeting with like Krane opened. Hey, this is like the current picture. This is up-to-date information. I have like these 5 submittals that are critical that needs to be approved. Otherwise, here's the impact of the schedule. Let's go get it done. Same way. Hey, like I've seen a couple of lead times shift. What's happening? Are there any alternatives? If not, how do we sort of tackle and handle that? So we've seen like more action-oriented meeting rather than information gathering meeting. More solving problems rather than, meetings to sort of surface problems. So that's sort of like a couple of clear changes that have like made me really excited.
That's interesting. So the people are coming into the meeting already with a synopsis of what's happening, and instead of having to spend the first half of the meeting setting the scene and explaining what's wrong, you've already got a list of what's wrong, and the meeting's more about solutions then rather than discussing them. Yeah,
absolutely.
So if we look at where we're at now, you've obviously got a lot of data from different customers in the platform as well, which I guess can also have a big impact on establishing whether a supplier's price or lead time is realistic based on historical data that you've got, which is going to be valuable in and of itself. Where do you think, looking at this in summer 2026, with your honest hat on, where do you think we are now versus where you would like to be in terms of the usefulness of deploying AI in construction procurement, and where perhaps some areas where we're not quite ready and where you think we're going to be going to in 2 or 3 years' time?
I think everyone's extremely excited about AI, and that's a huge shift for construction. Construction never gets too excited technology. So I am, and that's why like this is such an important moment for the entire industry, whether it's procurement or whether it's a different workflow. So let me start there. I think what teams are also beginning to understand is like inherently, every single project has millions and millions of data points that they need to learn from and take it to the next project. So great teams are beginning to put systems like Krane into their organization so that they can build on like their own data moat, right? So one project's data feeds into the next project. You're learning through the data. You're learning that, this supply chain had this types of problems and impacted the schedule this way. On the next project, let's sort of mitigate that. Let's figure out better vendors or better trade partners or a better process overall. So that's been exciting for us to see because like, as every construction, that's their IP. the way they do business, the way they, buy materials and then sort of handle that process overall. So I think we're in the early phase of like these companies rolling out systems like Krane to build that data moat that's their own moat. By the end of next summer, I can see like we're seeing early signs of learning, new team member learning through systems like us. So we have teams now who've deployed Krane to train new project engineers on how to sort of assess compliance, technical compliance, or assess how to, or learn how to build procurement logs. So there's been a nice shift that's happening. I think by the end of, by next summer, I can see more and more new project team members getting ramped up fast through systems like us, because we now are the standard process for that organization around procurement. Now they can learn really fast rather than like the way that I learned is like by being on 10 projects for 10 years. And now I have a good set of learning. And it took me a long time because nothing was structured for me. But now new engineers who are coming into the industry can move fast, learn fast, and sort of then like deploy and then deploy that learning into real outcomes and real projects. I'm really excited about that, James.
And that's because you've got that single source of truth and all of your data enriched in one place without them having to scramble around looking in email chains or in spreadsheets or even in the past, I guess, on paper as well.
Not only that, James, right? Like I think, one of the first things that I did in my career was to build a proper submittal log, right? And then like when I built it, like nobody gave me direct feedback to sort of change it over. I had to learn through a process of multiple projects what a good submittal log looked like. Same thing with a procurement log, right? I had to learn through many, many projects to sort of understand what a procurement log would be like and how to sort of, track material through that process. But today, with all of that data in one system, you could almost say, hey, listen, like I'm building a data center project. It's this size. It's in this region. Can you help me sort of understand how to build a procurement log? And like through the data that we have, project engineers and project managers will start to learn fast. And that's brilliant.
Understood. No, thank you for the clarification. Let's move on and talk a little bit about some real customer case studies. And if you can't name names because of confidentiality, that's fine. But you've worked on a healthcare project, the University of California, San Francisco, UCSF's Helen Diller Hospital, which is a 15-story facility delivered through TriVenture Partnership. And you've also works on data center builds where supply chain errors can push programs out by hundreds of millions a month, just given the criticality. So could you maybe cite an example of where a procurement gap nearly broke a project, and how would things look different with Krane in place?
I would say in all of those projects, procurement was probably the first decision that would make or break a project, right? Like I think I remember with, tariffs being where it was a couple of years ago, that was one of the data points that we had to sort of surface so that teams can decide where their supply chain is coming from, whether it's coming internally from the US or outside of the US. That's a simple example of like having that data point in a system and highlighting that risk allows teams to sort of make decisions, right? So that's one of those things. Yes, like, the work that we're doing with HIT on data center projects have been massive, right? Like they're one of the, I would say, best builders like in the market for data centers. And they're looking supply chain as a predecessor or as a constraint to all the work that they do. And they want their labor teams to be efficient through like better supply chain practices. So, that could go, sort of into long lead items like generators and chillers and air handling units and making sure Krane surfaces the right lead times. Krane identifies the right types of sort of vendors that can impact or help the schedule. That's a simple example. Or it can go into something simpler, like maybe steel. Or even, we had an example of like missing embeds for a concrete pour. So these things surfacing early allows teams to build faster, build better. Those are some common examples. As you know, I can't, introduce any of the data center owners for good reasons, but I think they're also looking at, supply chain is like the second biggest factor for them, or a constraint, compared to like something like power, which is like the number one. And they're trying to figure out, okay, like how do we use systems like Krane to better manage their data center capacity, and how can they roll out, data centers faster?
Yeah, I love that quote actually. So supply chain is the second biggest potential source of failure after power for a data center build, a data center construction company. That's really interesting. What is it then that surprises customers the most about Krane after they go live? What's the biggest? What do they usually cite as the biggest gain?
I mean, I think the visibility on clearly understanding the risk and the exposure of the supply chain on the schedule is the number one. That they're like really excited to sort of learn and know from day one. The other thing is they're, very, very excited and surprised by the amount of hours of like that grunt work that the teams do and the amount of hours that we're saving, right? Like, I mean, and then it sort of adds on and then they're really excited. Look, like on the data center side, everyone, like our customers have so much data centers to be built. They're just trying to like hire more and more great people. So that what they're trying to figure out is, can Krane superpower a project engineer or a project manager so that they can do more with sort of like the time that they have. And that's sort of an exciting point for us in this process. And the other thing is, like, I think we've also been very clear, AI is not magic, right? We're like, these agents will not do everything. All the, like we're procurement, we handle procurement, right? That's millions and billions of dollars worth of like equipment that these teams are purchasing. Our agents are not automatically purchasing these equipment and material for the team. That's not what we do. We do the grunt work for them. We help them evaluate options. We help them create the logs. We help them track the logs, right? So the project team is very much in the loop, but in this process. And that has sort of given them an understanding of, okay, what are some really good use cases of embedding AI into our workflow? Where can we sort of really identify savings? Where should like Krane, for example, not make a decision, right? So I think our customers and I have been like really surprised to sort of like understand this relationship between like an AI agent and a team member, right? So that's been an interesting journey for us. And I think it's going to get better and better and better.
Yeah, as time goes on. Yeah. And as you say, it's always been a pretty conservative industry. So if there was anything that you could change about how construction procurement teams view technology, is there anything that you would specifically single out?
Something that I would want them to sort of do more of?
Yeah. Or maybe do less of.
No, I think just understand the data moat around procurement, around supply chain, and the inherent risk on the schedule, and like put systems in place so that like learning is centralized, right? Like you have like we're on teams that have like, I don't know, 10 to 100 procurement managers, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Each one of them are on an email. Each one of them is learning about a package, about a vendor, about a process that he or she takes home, but the rest of the team's not learning through it, right? So I think I would, that's one thing I would call out. Like think about like in a world where LLMs are so powerful and will help us, then if we can sort of manage and put all of that data in one system, I mean, we can sort of build like this enormous data moat that can help our construction team. At the end of the day, we'll support our field team. And to be honest, James, that's what I think about, right? Like procurement is an upstream process of like, production, right? Like at the end of the day, like if we don't buy the right material at the right time, guess who's going to be burdened by that? Our field teams. They will have to deal with it, right? They'll take the brunt of like that pain. And that's like where I started my journey, being in the field, understanding that, having empathy. I'm not going to send a bunch of form work, for 2 levels worth of a deck when we're only building like, where we only need, 1.5 worth of like that material. That extra half of material will burden the team and will slow down the team, right? So And James, there's so many studies that show like construction productivity going down, and like all of these like reports from, consultants about how, the lack of productive industry. And that's one thing that I believe material flow on a construction project is one of the biggest indicators of like the productivity of the team. And that's honestly why we're doing this.
Yeah, and that whole data mode that you refer to is not just in the construction industry. It always boggles my mind just how many organizations view having clean data as being a cost rather than an investment. Because when you look at it logically, sales don't seem to have the problem of having really poor data around them, because the business understands that good customer and sales data is an investment. But yeah, for some reason in procurement, we still seem to struggle with that. It's a mystery to me too, but it's nice to see people like yourselves and all the other procurement tech companies that are focusing on data layer really looking to solve that, because it is the new gold, isn't it? If you have good data, I mean, there's a reason why Google and Amazon and all these tech companies invested so heavily in having the right data to be able to leverage that to their advantage. So yeah, I completely agree.
I think there's one little, I think, look, it's all also about incentives. There's different players and there's different roles that they play. You have general contractors, trade partners, suppliers, right? Like, and for us, at the end of the day, all of us come together to deliver a project on time and on budget. That's our goal, right? Like, and I think through systems like Krane, we're helping them sort of transfer data between these individuals so that each party can make better decisions, right? Like, so for suppliers can sort of be transparent about lead times so that contractors can build better with better data. At the same time, if suppliers have better demand data from construction teams, better schedules, they can sort of understand, hey, like, how do they sort of manage their own inventory? How do they, work with manufacturers and help their own cash flow in their organization? So I see this like data transfer helping each one of those organizations. And that has always been an issue in construction in general, the ability to share information. And that has not helped our industry. And that's like one of the things that's changing. And I think there's almost a mandate from owners. Hey, like, look, like at the end of the day, I want you guys to deliver a project for us. And like, we want everyone to work together and like share data so that we can be successful.
Awesome. Just conscious of the time, Eshan, and needing to wrap this up. The final question, and it's the easiest one I'm going to ask you. Where can people get in touch if they want to learn more about Krane or to connect with you?
The easiest way is to go to our website, krane.tech. That's where you can find, all the great stuff we're doing in procurement. But, you can find us deployed in any, new data center, healthcare, commercial projects, and find the real impact that Krane does in the field.
And we'll link to all of that in the show notes for anyone listening. Eshan, it's been great talking to you today. I've certainly learned a lot about the construction industry and about data centers. It's an area that I'd not really dipped my toes into before. So thank you for coming on the show. And if anyone's listening to this and wants to check it out, just click the links in the show notes. As always, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. It's always a pleasure having you listening to us, with there being so many procurement podcasts out there these days. We'll be back again, same time next month. Until then, take care wherever you are. Have a great summer if you're heading to the beach, and we'll catch you soon.